Here is something nobody told you when they called you too sensitive. You were never feeling too much. You were receiving more information than most people's nervous systems are built to process. That's not a flaw in your emotional wiring. That's a difference in your neurological hardware. And once you understand what's actually happening inside your brain, the story you've been told about yourself starts to fall apart completely. Let's start with mirror neurons. In the early 1990s, a research team in Parma, Italy, made an accidental discovery that quietly changed how we understand human empathy. They found that certain neurons in the brain fire not only when you perform an action yourself, but when you watch someone else perform it. Your brain, in a very literal sense, simulates the experience of other people from the inside. It doesn't just observe, it participates. In most people, this mirroring system operates at a moderate level, enough to read a room, enough to feel moved by something genuinely sad, enough to connect. But in people with high emotional sensitivity, research suggests this mirror neuron system runs at a significantly higher activation level. You don't just notice someone is upset. Your nervous system starts running their emotional state as if it were your own. You feel the tension in a room before anyone has spoken. You pick up the shift in someone's mood through a single word in a text message. You walk into a space where something happened hours ago and feel the residue of it. This isn't imagination. This is your neurology doing exactly what it was built to do. Just more of it, more of the time, more intensely than the people around you realize is happening. And here is where the problem starts. Not with the sensitivity itself, but with how early it gets labeled. Most people who feel everything deeply can point to a specific kind of childhood moment. Not necessarily trauma in the dramatic sense, just the steady accumulation of being told, directly or indirectly, that the intensity of your response was the problem. You cried at something others shrugged off, and someone called you dramatic. You felt the unfairness of a situation that nobody else seemed bothered by, and were told you were overreacting. You absorbed the emotional atmosphere of a room, and nobody else even noticed there was one. Over time, a belief formed. Not just that you felt too much, but that feeling that much was a form of weakness, something to manage, suppress, or apologize for. Psychologists who study emotional intensity describe this as misattunement, a chronic mismatch between how deeply someone experiences the world and how that experience is received by the people around them. And the long-term effect of misattunement isn't just self-doubt. It's the development of an exhausting second job, the continuous background task of monitoring your own emotional responses, deciding which ones are acceptable, scaling them down before they show, and presenting a version of yourself that won't make other people uncomfortable. That job runs constantly. It never clocks out. And most people doing it don't even realize how much energy it's consuming. But here is what the science keeps finding, which almost never makes it into the conversation about sensitivity. The same mirror neuron system that makes you absorb emotional atmospheres also makes you extraordinarily accurate. People with high emotional sensitivity consistently outperform others in studies measuring the ability to read facial microexpressions, the fleeting, involuntary signals that cross a face in a fraction of a second before conscious control can suppress them. They detect deception more reliably. They pick up on emotional subtext in language that others process only at the surface level. They are, in the most literal neurological sense, reading more of the room than the people in it realize they are reading. This isn't a soft skill. This is a perceptual advantage operating in the background of every interaction you have. The same wiring that makes a crowded room overwhelming is the same wiring that makes you the person others come to when they need to feel genuinely understood. You didn't develop this because you chose to be empathetic. You developed it because your nervous system was built with a wider aperture. More signal gets in. All of it. Now here is where it gets complicated. Feeling everything deeply creates a specific and underexamined problem with boundaries. Not because deeply feeling people don't understand boundaries intellectually. Most of them understand them very well. But because saying no when your nervous system is wired to absorb the emotional impact of your no on the other person feels like a double experience. You feel your own discomfort at the situation, and you simultaneously feel the other person's disappointment, frustration, or hurt as if it were happening to you. Every boundary costs twice what it costs someone with a less activated mirror system. And over time, many people stop setting them, not out of weakness, but out of a kind of neurological arithmetic where the cost simply seems too high. The result is a pattern that looks from the outside like people-pleasing or conflict avoidance. But underneath it is something more precise. A nervous system that experiences other people's emotions so directly that protecting yourself from them feels, on a biological level, like harming them. So what does any of this actually change? Understanding the mechanism doesn't switch off the sensitivity. It was never a switch you could flip. But it does change the question you're asking. Instead of asking why you can't just stop feeling so much, you start asking something different. What is all this information actually telling me? And am I using it, or just being used by it? Because the sensitivity was never the problem. The problem was never having a framework that told you it was data, not damage. You were not built wrong. You were built with a nervous system that takes the world seriously. That is not something to fix. That is something to understand well enough to stop working against it. What would change for you if you stopped calling it too much and started calling it what it actually is?